grab a pizza, you guys. Grab a pizza and hang out. Go ahead. So how many of you guys know what the word moral or morality means? Morals or morality. That's what we're going to talk about. Do you know where your morals or your morality comes from? So what I'm trying to say to you, for when I talk about morals or morality, let's say you decide to get upset with your friend and you're just going to go off on them and scream at them because they made you irritable. When is it a good time to do that? When is it right and when is it wrong? Let's say your best friend does something to you or someone you don't know that well. You know them a little bit, they do something wrong to you and you hit them or you do something bad to them. How do you know that's right or wrong when you're doing it? Because for some reason you're doing it thinking it's okay to do it, but what makes it right or wrong? Let's say you know you can't pass your exam, but you know if you pass it, you're going to move ahead in life. Is it okay to cheat and steal to get ahead in life? What do you guys think about that? It's the way you feel after you do it. So let's say you're going to cheat on an exam. Now, let's say you feel bad while you're doing it, but you know you're going to move ahead if you get an A. Does that make it right or wrong? To you personally, right? To you, does that make it right or wrong? What do you think? Yeah.
I think it will make it right.
It'll make it right. So if you're hungry and need food and you don't have no money and you know you're hungry, I mean, it's been 5 days, is it okay to grab someone else's food and steal it from them because you're hungry and almost starving? You feel hungry and starving, so you're going to do that. Does that make it right or wrong? See, you do what you got to do. The other rule is, let's say the government says if you own property, let's say a house, you're going to all make this decision when you get a house. You get a house, you have a backyard with a fence in it. The law says if a stranger comes and he comes into your home, inside the home, you can wipe him out because now he's inside your home and you can kill him in self-defense. You're okay. But let me ask you this. Do you agree with that? Do you think that if he comes in your backyard that you should be able to wipe him out right there because he knows he's inside your property? But that's not the law of the land. The law of the land says he can go in your backyard, and if you shoot him, you're going to jail. You have to wait until he's in your house, right? So who makes up these rules of morality for your life from this point on as you grow up and get older and older? Where do you get these rules and these laws from, right? This is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at standard. Where do we figure out right and wrong? Do you realize that they said religion came to hold down the masses, that they brought heaven and hell, and they brought all these rules, that it would hold the people down, that you would have a few men in power, and they would hold down the people by giving them these rules? Have you guys ever heard that? No. Okay. Well, that's something you're going to hear later on in your life. But when we see something like that, what do we say? We say it's not just religion. It can happen to anyone, right? You get a few good men who get greedy, want power, and the people start following them. They start to hold down the masses and make rules, make regulations, say things you can and cannot do, and that determines it. Now, let me ask you this. What would you say? How many of you are Christians here? Okay, so let's say you're a Christian and someone comes up to you and they say, hey, those crusades when you murdered and killed so many people in the Spanish Inquisitions, that was wrong. That was wrong to do those things. You guys killed and murdered so many people. What would you think as a Christian? See, we need an answer for that because it did happen. Good things happen at the crusades and bad things happen. And as Christians, you would have to give an answer to it. You know what the Christian says? The Christian says, I agree there are some bad things that happen in the religious world when those things happen, the crusade, but I want to weigh it out with the atheist dictators of the world. So when we weigh it out with the atheist dictators of the world, I got a chart here. Look what this chart says. It says Joseph Stalin killed 42 million people alone as an atheist dictator. Mao Zedong killed 37 million people, murdered and killed. Adolf Hitler, 20 million. Pol Pot, 2 million. So when we begin to weigh the evidence, we begin to see there's a contradiction that, no, it can happen to any worldview that you're standing on. You get a few good men that get a seared conscience, and they begin to think they rule the world. They can wipe out masses just because they want to. So we need to remember that as an answer for a Christian. Yeah, you had an answer question? Where? Oh, some of this was like in 5 years, 10 years, 3 years. Yeah, it was very quick. In fact, it all happened in the 20th century. They did all that killing in the 20th century. We've done more killing in the 20th century than any other century. You think we'd be getting better and knowing what to do, what's right and wrong, but we really haven't. But let's define morality. Morality is a principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong and good and bad behavior. That's what the dictionary says. Morality is a principles concerning a distinction between right and wrong and good and bad behavior. Listen, guys, when someone tells me something is bad or something is wrong or something is evil, then how do you know what the standard for goodness is? How do you know what's the standard for perfection of what is right? Because if you don't have a standard, you can't truly know what's right. So we need a standard to know these things. And where do we get them from? There was a famous philosopher, and he said this, because let's say some of you call something wrong and other people say, no, that's not wrong. How do you know the difference if one's wrong or one's right? And who's right in the decision that they make, right? Especially some of these questions we had in the beginning. You know what C.S. Lewis said, a famous philosopher who became a Christian? He said this, you would never know a stick is crooked unless you first knew what a straight stick looked like. You would never know, if you grabbed a stick and it was crooked, you would never say that's a crooked stick unless you first knew what a straight stick looked like. And so it is with morality. We can't know what's right and wrong with morality unless we know what is the perfection, what is the right way to look at things, and how do we know this, right? So this is what we're looking at. Jeffrey Dahmer. Have you guys heard Jeffrey Dahmer? He was an atheist, okay? He is a famous serial killer. And it said that he was in prison for 900 years. He brutally killed 17 men and boys, dismembered them, storing their parts, and did cannibalism with them. He's 900 years in prison. And when they talked to Jeffrey Dahmer about what he did, this is what he said, guys. Listen to what he said. If a person doesn't think that there's a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within these acceptable ranges? Right? So Jeffrey Dahmer says, if a person doesn't think that there is a God, if there's no God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior? Now think about it, guys. If you are just chemicals in motion, if you are just animals, what's the difference? We look at a lion or a tiger out in the grasslands. He sees a gazelle. He goes after the gazelle, shreds it, tears it apart, and leaves it, and go back and hang out with his family, his tribe out there. We don't look at him and say, oh, that's bad. That's bad behavior. We're going to put you in prison, and you're going to have to learn to modify your behavior because we think that's wrong. We don't do that. What do we say? We say he's just doing what he does. Let the animal do what he does. The strongest survive, right? This is what we're thinking. So if you're just chemicals in motion, if you're just an animal, like the atheists declare, then why not just live like one? Why do you begin to put a value system of what's right and wrong when you don't even know what the standard of goodness is? And how do we find that goodness of standard? Now, the Christian is always saying this, guys. The Christian is always saying, Christian is love with a standard, okay? And everyone will say, yeah, just love them. Just love them. Whoever it may be, just learn to love them and love them. Have you guys heard that? Just love them. Just love them. Do you realize the Bible says that love without a standard is no love at all? Love without a standard is no love at all. Would you let your wife that you married go out and cheat on you and keep on committing adultery more and more times because you love her? There's a standard, right? Would you let the little boy that's running across the street and he wants to run across the street because he sees a toy on the other side, he's 7 years old, would your love say, oh, let him do what he wants, that's just what he wants to do, let's let him do it? No, we heard the story of the old man who saw that same boy running across the street while a semi was coming, and he barely had a couple steps as an old grandpa pushed him out of the way. The little boy, 7 years old, rolls onto the asphalt, scrapes up his knees in the side of his face, and he begins to yell at his grandpa. What are you doing? Why'd you do that? Why'd you push me? And the grandpa said, if you knew what I saw, that the semi was coming, then you would know that what I did was good. It was a good standard for you. But because you don't know, you're crying and acting like I did something wrong to you, right? So we need to look at this stuff when we're looking at, the Bible says love without a standard is no love at all. So you guys remember that. It's very important. They'll tell you just love, love. Anytime you read the Bible, when God does something that's loving, he also puts a standard to it. Now remember, Jesus came into the world. And as he came into the world, he took a people and he began to tell them, this is how you're going to live your life. You're going to be separate from the rest of the world. I'm going to give you some morals to follow, some guidelines to follow. It's not the end result. The end result is when Jesus comes and he begins to fulfill all the laws. He'll be the end result. But let me ask you guys this. There's only 3 choices you can choose in life how you're going to live your morality. There's only 3 choices. And even if you don't choose it, you're going to fall on one of them. And let me give them to you real quick, okay? These are the 3 choices. You're standing on one of these choices today, and you're going to be standing on them for the rest of your life. You don't get 50 ways to figure out morality. You don't get 20 ways. There's only 3 ways. These are the 3 ways. Remember this, because you have to remember this your whole life, okay? There's individualism. The colleges is teaching that today to all the college people, and they're going to teach it to you. Individualism says, you have a brain and I have a brain. I'm an individual and you're an individual. You might think it's okay to lie, steal, and rape. I don't think it's okay, but who am I to judge you? That's you. You're your own brain. You're your own individual. You can do what you want. That's one way to live your life. Are you living that way? Do you want to live that way where someone can come up and pop you because he doesn't feel like you deserve to be living? Because that's what we're looking at when we look at that way of individualism. You can't tell him he's wrong or right. He wants to hit you. He's going to hit you. The other way is you get a convention of men and they tell you what's wrong and right. And these men begin to say, you see that belly, that baby inside that belly? Freddie says it has worth, value, and dignity. And you grab a group of men that begin to now dictate to you what's wrong or right. You know what that's called? It's called a convention of men. You get a group of men that begin to tell you what's wrong and right. But then Freddie, 10 years later, decides that baby in that belly doesn't have worth, value, and dignity, and you can also infanticide it. That means when it comes out of the belly, you can also kill it. Now, if they make that rule, is it okay for you to follow that rule? Because now you're running under the dictatorship of men, the convention of men. The third way and the last way, you guys are going to live in one of those 2 ways or the third way. The third way is this, guys, and this is very important. Something that's bigger than me and you. Something that transcends our minds. Something that's bigger than human beings. And you know what that is? A God. A God that's holy, perfect, righteous, and knows all things. Remember, a standard is if you know all things. And because he knows all things, he could set a standard for how you live your life. And that's why Christianity chooses to follow God and his standards, because he knows all things and he set a standard for how you should live your life. And we never go off that standard. Every time you talk to a Christian, he should be standing on the worldview that the Bible is the foundation, because the God who knows all things, the Christian God, set a standard for us to follow. 3 ways to choose from, guys. So weigh these out in your head, because you're going to be thinking of these, and you're going to want to come up with a reason. Why do you live in the morality lifestyle that you live in? All right, guys, thank you so much. You guys have a good day.